March 1st to eat.
Yay!
So welcome to LAAF 30, LAAF Triple X. Yay! We never really thought we would get past 2 LAAFs, so it's quite an accomplishment, as is every subsequent LAAF after this. So I am happy to introduce today's lecturer, Mr. Jonathan Huang. Jonathan Huang is an expert in fonts and graphic design and other things that I have no expertise in, and he is a attender of Mandarin Baptist Church of Los Angeles, which I think sounds like a dessert. And he is an upstanding citizen and is very into freedom and fashion and other good things. So
Thank you guys. He's just my size.
And he's just Bonnie's type.
Yay!
Thank you guys so much for coming. I was preparing all week for this because it's been almost a year since my last lecture, which was on Helvetica, and I hope you guys learned a lot from that lecture. I said I would return with a sequel, and this is the sequel. So this is LAAF 30, just my type. There you go. An in-depth look of typography and its effects on how the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. Just like that. Yeah. So if you don't know what
Did you make that?
They're so quick.
If you see quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog, that is a pangram, as I'm told. It uses every single letter of the alphabet. So
At least one.
at least once.
Where's the S?
There's no S.
Oh!
Jumps.
It's a failed graph.
Jumps
Failed
so
graph.
fast.
Failed
It
graph.
has to be jumps so fast.
There you go.
It
jumps.
All right. Anyways,
You already have the D.
today we are going to talk about several things. We're going to talk about why typography matters. What exactly is typography? Statistics of typography. Quiet. What is good/bad type? Crimes against typography. Can you be a typographer? And we'll finish it off with a Dear Laugh letter. Okay. So why typography matters? The main point of effective design is to communicate an idea or an emotion. Likewise, typography design should help communicate that emotion and not confuse the viewer. Without typography, one would be confused on how to read or interpret content. Most importantly, typography is not to be confused with typography, which is the study of Earth's shape and figures. Now, I just wanted to throw in a quick font joke. What kind of fonts do Campbell Soup's lovers prefer?
Alphabet.
Soup?
Chicken noodle.
What?
Roman.
No? Alright. Anything.
I don't get it.
Because they're condensed.
Okay. But what exactly is typography? Typography is the design of setting type in a way that is appropriate. It is the relation of scale of space, line length, space between lines, that's called leading, space between letters, which is called kerning, caps, bold, italics, and the use of typefaces. The designer who places type on the page needs to be familiar with dashes, such as dashes as opposed to M dashes, ligatures, type form, and a variety of typefaces.
What is a typeface?
So typefaces are anything between like Arial to like Zaffino, Times Roman. Those are all typefaces, as people would call fonts, right? So the technical term are typefaces.
Oh.
And
What's type form?
type form, it is the actual like parts of the letter.
What's a ligature?
Ligature is totally fine. Ligature, for example, like if there is a T or an I, like there's things that there are old letters that will connect together, like an S and a T. Somehow they'll connect in a more fancy way.
But what exactly is typography?
we'll find out. It's like
What's M
What's an M dash? What's an M dash?
So there's dashes, and then like
Oh my god,
like
what's an
this,
M dash?
right? And then there's an M dash which is actually a little bit longer.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
The length of
So
an M.
those function very
Oh, it's the
differently.
length of an M.
They're actually the length of an M.
It's amazing.
An M?
But what did you write M
A small M.
Because M's
Yeah.
are longer
Yeah,
than.
longer than just a dash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Whoa.
So,
What is so
Wow.
so yeah, we'll explain what typography is. This is a little short video.
Typography is what language looks like. It is the art and techniques of type design, modifying type glyphs, and arranging type. Type glyphs are created using a variety of illustration techniques. The arrangement of type is the selection of typefaces, point size, line length, leading, and kerning. The anatomy of a letter form consists of stem, baseline, ascender, descender, counter, serif, X height, and many more characteristics. Typography is most commonly performed by typographers, graphic artists, and art directors. The digital age opened up typography to new generations of visual designers. A good typographer is someone who communicates a point of view with skill and imagination and makes the type taste good.
Alright, so that's a short movie. It explains, very briefly like what type consists of, with point size, kerning, leading, all these things you have to like consider instead of just like typing it on Word. Like for me, I never type on Word. I use a layout design program called InDesign. And so when I write down a block of copy, I have to consider, well, not just the typeface, but how much space is between the lines, or if the words are too far apart from each other, I have to like squeeze them together manually. So there are things that the computer does that helps people like me by, there's optical, where it squeezes these letters together optically, because it's hard for some letters to go side to side, because an L and an I, they have a certain amount of space, but if you put like an O and a D, they don't have necessarily the same space between each other. So you have to like optically move them a little further than an L and an I. So I'm going to show you some examples of what hierarchy looks like. Hope that's spelled correctly. Okay. So hierarchy plays a huge part in typography. It really dictates how a person reads something. So for example, if you look at this poster, right? These are big letters compared to the small letters there. So naturally, the hierarchy is, this is the first read, and that's the second read, if you can actually read that. You can play with, scale, or color, or different
Italics.
Italics, or all these kinds of things to create hierarchy. But I think most importantly, hierarchy is based on scale and legibility. Now this one brought to us, I think it's Little John, is proximity. These words are in huge, or very close to each other. And so when they're formed like this, letters aren't necessarily the most important thing. It becomes more the object by which the letters are forming. And so because of this proximity, you start losing the context, but you start looking at an overall picture. And so typography in this way, the words are more the second read than the bigger picture. And so the hierarchy is actually Little John, and then this, and then then it goes to scale. So next we have almost a complete reversal of what we just saw. We take forms and we form through repetition. For example, this go, the letter. So go in hierarchy to the objects is read first, and then the objects second. So in repetition, it creates uniformity, and it doesn't distract you from reading like what the letters are. So you consider like what is it exactly? What's your message? What's the contents? And then you form your typography to do just that. Now, weights we didn't talk about too much in my last lecture, but they play a huge importance in considering how you want to say your message, because weight, people are in different weights, and so they appear differently to you. People can be skinny, could be really unhealthy, or people can be like really buff, and you consider them strong. So likewise, typography uses those kinds of principles. You can have really light and really small type, which you'll think about like a whisper, like, or you can have like big type, and it's very bold, which is a really loud voice. You can also see that in caps. That's why people don't want to type in caps when you're chatting with somebody, because it's just yelling.
Or bold.
So the weights of different letters, say a lot about the message that you're saying. Next we have scale, which you can see through this example. This is much bigger than this. It is used to create depth on a page. The last thing you want on either the web or even in print is flatness. You want people to see that I want to read this, this, and then this. And I want to know that there's scale. Scale is really important because it has a lot to do with hierarchy. So that's another thing to consider when you're doing, when you're laying stuff out. Type contrast, really, the importance of that is to divide pages, or even just to highlight something. Like you want a block of text to be white on black, that will be separate from everything else. Or you want to do something artistically. It really frees you from just the white page. You can divide the page into many different sections using type contrast. And also, it doesn't have to necessarily separate, but at least it brings a greater attention to when you can't use size or scale to create that difference. Now, we're going to go to statistics on typography. I was doing some research on this, and this was a study that I found concerning over about 100 websites and how they use sans serif versus serif. And in my last lecture, if you guys weren't here, the difference between sans serif and serif is that serif has feet, and sans serif is without feet. So this was a study done to see, what percentage of websites use sans serif versus choosing serif. And we found that they found that 60% of all, the website that they studied had used a sans serif typeface for at least headlines in this one. And mostly Arial, Verdana, Lucida Grande, and Helvetica. And among them, examples are CNN, Ars Technica, Slate, BBC, and New Scientist. Those may be some websites that you may be familiar with. The most popular serif typeface are Georgia and also Baskerville. And they're sort of, this graph just to show in comparison, how often they are used. And according to the study, sans serif fonts are still more popular than serif fonts for headlines, although they have seemed to have dropped in popularity in recent years. Now we go into body copy. And we find that 34% of websites uses serif, and those examples are the New York Times typographic